Good evening, everybody. Welcome to one more installment of our Thursday night Bible study. We've been working our way through the book of Ruth in the Old Testament for the last couple of weeks. We had a week off last Thursday. We may finish up the book of Ruth today. We're studying Ruth, so we get a little background into the life of King David. We're going to be working on his life for a while. A man after God's own heart, but a huge knucklehead. So there's probably lots of lessons for us to learn. Certainly for all of us who are trying to stay close to God. So we're glad you're here. Everybody who's watching on Zoom, we're glad to have you here as well. And let's find Ruth chapter 3. Just in case you've forgotten everything that happened in Ruth chapter 1 and 2. Okay? Elimelech and his wife, Naomi, are from Bethlehem. There's a famine. They have two boys, Mahlon and Chilion, whose names mean what? Remember?
Sickly and...
Sick and weak.
Sick and weak, that's right.
Okay? They took the sick and weak boys, the Pale brothers, went over to the other side of the Dead Sea, over to Moab, where there was water and where they could live. While they were there, the boys got old enough to be married. They married two Moabite chicks, Orpah and Ruth. Elimelech died, actually before the marriages. And then sick and weak both got sicker and weaker, and they both died, leaving Naomi and her two daughters-in-law widows, stranded, abandoned in a strange land. And so finally it was clear that it was okay to go back to Bethlehem. Naomi headed that way. They got down the road. Ruth and Orpah said, we want to go too. And she said, no, don't hang on to me. You need to just go back home. There's not going to be any more sons for you to marry. I'm way too old. You need to find nice Moab boys to marry, start a new life here. Orpah said, okay, you're right. And she left. Ruth would not let go and followed her all the way back to Bethlehem. At the tail end of things last week, we saw Ruth doing what was a very common practice, gleaning in the fields during the harvest. That means going around the edges of the fields, the corners of the field, picking up things that have been dropped, and putting that grain into her own container. That was a stipulation that God put in the law for the Israelites. Don't harvest to the edges and the corners, and don't pick up stuff that you drop. We leave that for the poor. So Ruth was there picking things up early in the morning, working late, working hard. Boaz noticed her. They had a conversation. There was clearly some kind of a hallmark chemistry moment where something's going on, and he said to his workers, take extra good care of her, throw some stuff out of your bundles for her to find. We want to take good care of her. She's a good woman. She's taking good care of her mother-in-law, who's not even actually her mother-in-law. She's doing great things.
And it says
Boaz
and Naomi were related.
Yes. Well, Boaz and Elimelech were related. Some kind of kinsman.
Okay.
Boaz does have a special title that goes back to the book of Leviticus. If something happened in your family, there was somebody in your tribe, your clan, who's called the Kinsman Redeemer, some related person who would try to step in and make things better. Like if this is an extreme situation with Ruth, but there were no husbands available for this family line, and so a kinsman redeemer would have the sort of the right of first refusal to marry the widow and to have a family with her for the dead relative, but also to take care of legal affairs and financial affairs and make sure that they didn't starve to death and that sort of thing. So, all right, that's kind of the super quick summary of chapters 1 and 2. So let's pick up in chapter number 3. In chapter 3, there are 3 conversations that kind of help move this story forward. This whole story is the book of Ruth is put together in a very interesting way. It reads kind of like a script for a movie or a TV show. It's a great love story, how it all works out. They have all these little literary things in here about, and then you'll never guess what happened. Kind of transitions. There are these conversations in chapter 3 that move the story forward. The first one is verses 1 through 6. Let's read that. One day, Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now, Boaz, with whose women you have worked, is a relative of ours. Tonight he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." Ruth answered, "I'll do whatever you say." So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Okay, so we talked a little bit about threshing last week. So the workers go out into the field with barley or wheat. They use their sickle. They cut the stalks off the ground. They tie up these big bundles of grain and make them into shocks. They bring those to the threshing floor. It's a hard stone floor, probably not natural. Probably was, stone was brought in for that. And then they would lay all the grain out, and then either they would use animals like oxen to pull kind of a sledge around the top of it to loosen the grain from the chaff and the stalks. Sometimes they'd use like a flail to rod with another long beater bar, like on a chain, to knock the grain loose from the stalks. And then they'd come through, they come through with a fork, get all of the big stuff off. Then the next layer is to come through with a shovel, scoop the grain and the chaff up into the air. In the evening, when the wind is coming off of the Mediterranean, the breeze blows the chaff that way, and the grain just falls down. And then that goes up in a big stack, big piles of grain. So that's how the threshing floor works. It's a big job. And it obviously takes a lot of manpower. There's a lot of effort to get all that done. And like in a lot of other situations where there's harvest, there's a lot of food and drink that goes along too. Because you got to feed everybody. It is really hard work. You want them to stay working. So there's sort of like a little tailgate party clearly going on. Everybody's eating and drinking, having a great time. The harvest is going well. Naomi knows that's what's going on during this barley harvest. So she says to Naomi, what?
Get prettied up.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sneak into
Get
his
all
bed.
putted up and
Go put some smell on. Go get ready. Don't dress like you just came out of the field. And after he is really relaxed and having a great time, after he's laid down, you go figure out where he is, and then you lay down at his feet and uncover his feet. And lay down there by his feet and wait. This is weird.
Or what?
Kind of weird stuff.
Dawn figured it
I
out.
know, but isn't that against some good
That was-
premarital?
and that was the
That's
first
not
date.
that's not why.
Yeah, well, they'd met
That's what it
once.
sounds like.
They'd met in the field, but this is the first deal.
Asking him to be.
Yeah, but
Sorry, Redeemer,
Naomi and Ruth
her.
both
I was
knew
like,
that he
he's
had taken a
accepting
shine to
her.
her by then.
Probably. He'd been very generous. He'd been very gracious to them.
So
extra special favors, extra protection.
Okay.
Because Naomi already knew
But
that
it
he
does
was
kinda sound like
bound to
that.
protect
It's
them
where it's
because of
leading.
the Jewish law. And he'd already, taken his shine to Ruth. I don't think it was really weird to us, but probably not super out of the ordinary to them.
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit. So Naomi and Ruth have been back home for some time. We don't know how long. The harvest is still going on. So they can't have been there for like months and months. It has to be within just a few weeks. And the way that I read it is that Naomi is feeling bad for her young, I'm going to go with attractive daughter-in-law who is stuck with her for the rest of her life, providing for her. And here she is, this old, widowed, bitter woman who doesn't even have a nickel, 2 nickels to rub together. And she's like, I gotta find a husband. We gotta find somebody to marry Ruth. We have to have somebody. This is just not right. You don't have to agree with me about that. That's kind of the way that I see it. And so she says, well, I was gonna look for a husband. Boaz is a really great guy. He's really upstanding man. The community loves him. Earlier, back in chapter 2, it says that he's a mighty man. He's got some prominence in the community. Everybody looks up to him. He's successful. And she has already talked to Ruth about him being a kinsman redeemer, or a goel, or I forget what some of your other terms were. So, let's see if we can make this work. So Naomi says, get all prettied up. I want you to go find him, hang out there. He'll tell you what the next thing is to do. You go wherever he lays down on the stacks of grain, where he's sleeping. I want you to go up to him. I want you to uncover his feet and lay down and wait. Now that sounds kind of like an odd thing to do, but first of all, there wouldn't have been many women there, maybe any. And so she's going under the cloak of darkness to make sure she's not found out. She wants to get his attention, but she can't go, hey! Because, maybe he's ex-military and he, wakes up punching and swearing and stuff. So the idea is just going to roll the covers back. His feet will get cold. He'll wake up to cover his feet.
You'll be there.
And there's Ruth. And so she says that's what she's going to do. She gets washed up. She puts on perfume. She changes out of her poor widow's clothes into something more appealing. Clearly, Naomi has, put 2 and 2 together in her own head and has figured out that there might be some possibility here. That brings us to verse 7. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, just means he was glad. Doesn't mean he's toasted. He's just having a great night. He went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I'm your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family, or kinsman redeemer. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. Although it is true that I am a guardian redeemer of our family, there is another who is more closely related than I am. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to do his duty as your guardian redeemer, good, let him redeem you. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized, and he said, no one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor. He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." And when she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and placed the bundle on her. Then he went back to town. Okay. Ruth finds Boaz exactly where he's expected to be. He's sleeping at the end of the grain pile. He's had a lot to eat. He's had a lot to drink. He's in a relaxed state of mind. Big stack of grain. He is feeling really good about the harvest. And so Ruth comes, and there's all this instruction about uncovering and covering. There's a lot that is made out of that act of uncovering Boaz's feet. Based on the unimpeachable character that we have seen so far in both Boaz and Ruth, there is nothing funny going on here. Okay? Uncovering his feet is not a euphemism for something else. There are times in the Old Testament especially where feet are used as a euphemism for genitalia. That is not the case here. These are both righteous people who have a great moral character, and they are not fooling around. He wouldn't risk that. He wouldn't risk that for her either. And so essentially what happens here in uncovering his feet is that she's making her intentions known. Boaz didn't act fast enough to ask her if she'd like to go out. So she's been instructed by Naomi to go and make the first move. See what he thinks. You go uncover his feet, and he will take care of the rest. I'm pretty sure I know how this goes down, dear. You just go. It'll all work out just fine. So we make his feet naked in the middle of the night. It gets cool. He wakes up to cover his feet back up and finds this lump of a human down at the end of the sleeping bag. Who in the world are you? It wouldn't have been uncommon to have somebody sleeping at your feet. Servants would have done that pretty regularly with their master or lord or employer, however you want to word that. But for Ruth, this is an indication that she would like to be covered up by Boaz's protection. I'm uncovering you so you will throw that blanket not just over your own little tootsies, but over me as well. Make me yours. Stick your finger here and go over to Ezekiel. You'll want to go to the right for that. Ezekiel chapter 16, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel 16. Ezekiel 16:8. The whole passage is God giving instructions to Ezekiel, words to give to Jerusalem. They're in a horrible position in their history. And 16:8, it's God talking. Later, I passed by, and when I looked at you, Jerusalem, and saw that you were old enough for love, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your naked body. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the Lord, the sovereign Lord, and you became mine. Okay? So I'm going to believe that's the same situation. That for God to be the potential husband, to throw his cloak, his coat, his blanket over Jerusalem. He is claiming Jerusalem as his bride, making a covenant with her. So we go back to Boaz and Ruth, and it seems like that's what she's asking for. Let's make this a real thing. Cover me up with your protection. She's the one proposing marriage. That seems very forward in the Old Testament, but must be okay. All right, so he finds Ruth, and how does he respond after he says, "Who are you?" In verse 10 and on, what's his reaction?
Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. What is that?
He says, you picked an old geezer like me instead of one of the youngsters?
You're right on, Cody. That's what that says right here in this translation.
Those exact words.
Yeah, I love it.
Because
Well.
she could trust him.
I am
was
one.
rich.
What's better than that?
Well, see, I didn't understand
Doesn't matter
that
if he's
before.
good looking,
I
as
want
long as
it.
he's rich.
Bless you, my
Makes
child.
sense.
So I can put myself in that position. Here I am, a 50-something-year-old dude, laying here all in the cold all by myself. I've got no woman, no family, and all of a sudden, there's this sweet young thing, 24 years old, big brown eyes, long brown hair, who curls up beside me and says, "I'm awfully cold." My first reaction is, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. I hit the jackpot. It's the lottery winner, man." So I believe he is absolutely, totally flattered and flabbergasted, like, "Why are you? I'll be darned. I never saw this coming in 1,000 years. I hoped for it."
This is not your
Yes,
usual
I,
Bible study.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, it is. Well, that's a good explanation for kindness. Does anybody else have kindness?
But he-
Because,
Go ahead, I'm
No.
sorry.
because what are the odds?
Pretty good, obviously.
You know, one of the
Boaz.
things that we've seen in more than one place in the book of Ruth is this idea of loving kindness. It's what we see from Ruth to Naomi, the special, I'm sure you don't remember the word for it, Hesed, Hesed, or Chesed, Chesed. It's the kind of love that we get from God. Loving kindness, compassion, concern. And so we've seen Ruth giving that to Naomi. We have seen Boaz offering it to Ruth and Naomi by the care that he gives her in the field. And so Boaz is laying there in the middle of the night rubbing his eyes like, "Is this a dream or what?" Like, oh, sweet sister, this is an amazing kindness. She's showing her compassion, her concern. She's expressing all the goodness that she's received from him. She's seems to be turning it right back around to offer it to him as well.
But this just doesn't come out of the blue.
No, he knew her. He knew her. He knew when her husband died. He saw how she treated the family, and he knew how. I'm sure.
And what he says later on is the whole town knows
Right.
about the kind of woman that she is.
And I'm sure he was shocked. when he
Well, yeah,
woke up.
because she's been there at least a couple of months, the whole harvest.
And Bethlehem is not like, it's not like Ogden, where there's 250,000 people and, you don't know everybody. In Bethlehem, you know everybody.
Yeah.
So.
And I think people treated people differently back then. They didn't. If it was today,
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
that
what
would
would
have
you
been
do
all.
if you
But
woke
still,
up and found a woman
to be
at
an old
the end of your
guy-
feet? You'd probably get arrested.
You would run and find witnesses that could testify to your character.
My wife always puts me on her feet. I love
Be
it.
an older guy in a very small town and have that. I mean, yeah, that's amazing. That's just
Naomi was looking out for Ruth too, though, when she did this, right?
Oh, yeah.
well,
So she said she wanted you to be
yeah,
taken
and
care of.
she wanted her to have opportunities she wasn't gonna get living with Naomi.
Boaz's words there as he talks about her, all the people of my town know that you are a woman of noble character. The phrase that describes the kind of woman that she is sometimes is translated mighty. You are a mighty woman. Now, maybe you remember a chapter or two ago when we are introduced to Boaz, he is described as a mighty man. So here you got this amazing power couple coming together right there in the middle of Bethlehem. Mighty Boaz, mighty Ruth, wonderful people, loving people, generous people, and they seem to have landed in each other's, well, I would say laps, but it's more like feet. So, so Ruth has said, "Look, I'm interested. I think that you should marry me. I want to be protected by you." And he seems elated at the idea, which seems reasonable.
And if he sends her back, so nobody knows, he's protecting her that way also.
Yeah. Some people might see that as being kind of a little rude, but I believe it's absolutely to protect her character and integrity and his as well.
Well, and he gives her grain, so she has an excuse for being there.
Yeah, that hadn't occurred to me until a little bit later when I said, like, what's this grain all about? They already have a bunch of grain.
Yeah, that would give her a legitimate reason to be there.
Right.
And it sounds to me when he says that there weren't a lot of women there. No one must know that a woman came to the threshing floor.
So apparently, there weren't women on the threshing floor, it was just the men doing it.
Well, we'll hang on to that question for just a
Well,
second.
mine says the, so it doesn't
No one must
specifically
know
say.
that a woman came to the threshing floor.
Just hang on to that for a second. What's the first stipulation, though, that he gives? Okay, Ruth, this is a great idea. However, what's the problem?
There's somebody else.
Okay,
Relative.
there's a cousin who is one less time removed or something than Boaz is, and he would be the one who really should have the right of first refusal or whatever, to be the Kinsman Redeemer. He has the position anyway, but the question is, will he actually act on the role as the Redeemer for these women? So this is a great idea. First thing tomorrow, we'll go check this out. I'll approach him, and we'll get an answer. He says, "Stay for the rest of the night. Go back to sleep." Trey throws his blanket over her. And first thing in the morning, before anybody else is awake, he gives her some grain to carry home, and sends her back to Naomi. She's an industrious woman. Anybody who sees Ruth up early carrying a sack of grain is not going to think something hinky is going on, because she has been compassionate. She has been working hard. That's just the kind of woman she is. Again, Boaz is being a really upstanding man, doing what is right by her. Okay, now, so stay until the morning, because we can't have any women here at the threshing floor. Okay, so again, stick your finger here. Go over to Hosea, Daniel, Hosea, Joel. Hosea chapter 9. Hosea 9:1. Somebody read it.
Hosea 9 what?
1.
Do not rejoice, O Israel, with exultation like the nations, for you have played the harlot, forsaking your God. You have loved harlot's earnings on every threshing floor.
Oh my gosh, what kind of women hang out at the threshing floor? Barflies. Lonely women who are looking to make a buck with the harvesters who have been partying too hard.
Where are you at?
That's Hosea 9:1. The description that God gives of his people is that they are playing the prostitute of the threshing floor. I'm gonna assume that this is a known occurrence, you know, kind of like at one point, you didn't go down on 25th Street because, you know, there's all kinds of people there. This has been an ongoing thing in the culture for a while, that prostitutes hang out at the threshing floor because all the wives are home with the kids while the husbands are off harvesting all the grain. Okay? So Boaz, again, upstanding, righteous, good man, doesn't want anybody to think that Ruth has been coming around for some kind of special favors with him. I'm sure she wouldn't want that either. She's just a lady out getting grain. Verse 16. Unless you have any comments or questions?
And again, Naomi knew that Boaz would not take advantage of her, or she would have sent her.
Well, he had already promised that if anybody in his field touched her,
They'd be in trouble.
don't let anybody bother her. Bother somebody else, but leave Ruth alone.
Can
Verse-
I say something?
Yeah.
I'm just bringing this up because you had mentioned, anyway, I was teaching a Mormon, elderly woman in Bible study, and I said to her, she said to me, you know, I've been a Mormon for 53 years, and she said, I'm not gonna change now. And I said, I didn't ask you to change. You know, I just have one question. And she said, what's that? I said, how did this plural marriage start? And she said this to me, there wasn't enough men to go around for the women. And you had just said, back then, there wasn't enough. What did you say? There wasn't enough women for men?
Well, there aren't any women. There aren't any women at the threshing floor because they're all home taking care of their families.
Oh, okay.
So all the men are, you know, it's boys camping weekend.
Right. But I was stuck on that. I didn't know how to answer that. You know, and it was just it just caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Well, and that may have been the case back in 1840, whatever, when they were making their way across. I don't actually know how well that worked, but.
That's okay, they don't either.
What did you say?
That's okay.
Cody
They
said
don't
that's
know
okay.
either.
They didn't know how it worked out either.
I'm sorry.
And thinking probably the same thing came about at that time, and I'm not defending the LDS
No,
or the Mormons, but I'm thinking as the pioneers were coming across the United States, the men and the boys were out getting shot protecting
Right.
this whole group of people.
Did you note that in the Book of Mormon, it says that's how they will tell the right people, the righteous, because they will be husbands of one wife.
Oh,
Really?
And they don't go by the Book of Mormon, so.
They don't go by the Bible either.
No, they don't.
So what happens is these men take the women
Okay, get back
in
to.
Okay.
as a protector and morally.
We are being recorded, aren't we?
That's the way I would think that it would be, because they think women are stupid and can't do anything but what they choose, you know, what men tell them to do.
Right.
And the only women that are out there that are single are the prostitutes. So to make a woman honest, a man takes her in to his home and marries her, and that's how I kind of would perceive that the plural marriages would come along. As their protector, they married him. No? That's not it?
When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi,
You're gonna be on TV tomorrow.
Naomi asked, how'd it go, honey? That's Sarah's translation. Then she told her everything Boaz had done for her and added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today. What did we learn about Boaz's character right there?
It's amazing, it's good.
He finishes what he starts. He gets a good idea, he's gonna He's going to carry it out.
Make it away.
When Ruth gets home,
The man of his word.
Naomi says, so how did it go? What did happen? Literally, it's the same question that Boaz asked Ruth in the middle of the night. Who are you, my daughter? She knows who Ruth is. So the idea of the question is not just who are you, but whose are you, my daughter? Are you coming back to me as just my daughter, or please tell me it's true that that he has said that it's a done deal, that you're going to be his wife? Whose is she? Is she Naomi's, still sad little widow girl, or is she going to be Boaz's wife? She is thrilled to hear the answer. She knows that Boaz is going to carry this thing through to completion that day. He finishes things, especially ones that he's interested in.
Who are you? I am yours. 3:9.
Who are you? I'm yours, Ruth. Okay, and that brings us to the end of chapter 3.
I love Ruth.
Ready for chapter 4? This last chapter breaks into two sections. Verses 1 through 12 are the negotiations for this arrangement. And then 13 to the end, verse 22, that's the legacy of what happens, how their family falls out here. So let's read verse 1 there in chapter 4. Meanwhile, while Ruth is heading back to her home, Boaz is heading out for the day as well. He goes to the town gate, sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along, this closer redeemer. And Boaz said, come over here and sit down. Now, I'll just interrupt this here because I'm not exactly sure what to do with it. One of the commentators on this passage said that essentially what Boaz says, that he doesn't really say, come here, my dear good friend. It's like, hey, come here, Mr. Who's his face? What's his face? Whatever. I'm not sure that I picked that up. It must be deep in the language somewhere. But the NIV gives him a much more respectful invitation for discussion than what might actually be there in the original language. So,
My friend.
hey, buddy, come over here. Sit down. I got an idea for you. So he went over and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of town and said, sit here. And they did so. You notice pretty much whatever Boaz says, everybody's just willing to do. He said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so, but if you will not, tell me, so I'll know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and then I am next in line. I'll redeem it, he said. Then Boaz said, just know that on the day that you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, whoa. Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I can't do it. Now, in the early times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy yourself. And he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together build up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah."
I'm confused. So Boaz wasn't married to Ruth.
Not yet. What we have just read there is the negotiations. Okay? In case you're missing it here. So Boaz wants Ruth. All kinds of events were formalized and solemnized at the city gate. It was where he went for social hangouts. I think that's where the guys go to drink coffee in the morning. It's where the ladies go to talk. Business propositions were handled there. Legal affairs, like court was held there at the city gate. And so Boaz goes there first thing in the morning. He finds 10 of the city elders and says, "I'm going to need you. Stay right here." He sees that this other man who is a closer relative of Elimelech is coming. That's what he's been banking on. So he wants to make sure, just being a good guy. "Hey, I just want to let you know that Naomi's getting ready to sell the property. You're actually closer in line than I am. I thought you probably would want it." "Well, yeah, sure, absolutely. I'd love more property. What farmer doesn't want more ground?" "Okay, good deal. That's a great thing. That'll help them out a lot. Oh, by the way, just know that when you purchase that, you also get a wife." "Whoa, wife? No, I don't need a wife. I don't need one of those. I'm fine the way I am." Okay, if I take the property and the wife, that could put my inheritance in danger. It's like, what? Okay, so how to even describe this? Okay, so when the Israelites moved into the Promised Land, the whole country was divided up into tribes and into individual parcels for the families in the tribes. And those family plots were supposed to stay the family plots forever. Okay, if you bought and sold property on the year of Jubilee every 50 years, it reverted to the original owners. There's all kinds of confusing things. I don't know how it was all going to work out. The deal is they never really did it the right way anyway. Okay, so Elimelech's property was going to go to Mahlon, who is clearly the oldest of the son, of the two sons, married to Ruth. Ruth is the widow of the deceased property owner. And so if the Kinsman Redeemer, whatever Kinsman Redeemer marries Ruth, he will have a child with her to reestablish her dead husband's line. And so all that property will go here. So if Kinsman Redeemer takes all of his money to purchase this other property, and then he gets Ruth, and they have a child, and the child ends up being, establishing Mahlon's line, then this guy has taken all of his money, he's bought stuff, he has nothing to show for it, he's lost everything.
When does his line start?
I believe if there had been additional children. I believe that's the way that works. But the firstborn, in Hebrew culture, the firstborn gets everything, which I say, yeah, all of the debt of my parents, not just part of it.
I have a pretty good explanation below of the line
Okay.
here.
Lay it on us.
It says the near kinsman agreed to pay the price of purchasing the land of Elimelech until he found out that it involved the responsibility of marrying and supporting the widow Ruth. this would jeopardize his own inheritance, being a double financial burden by, one, buying the field for Ruth's heir rather than his own, and two, providing for Ruth and her family.
It's a big job. He might not be as good of a farmer as
So he actually
Boaz.
didn't want Ruth?
Wanted the property, but not Ruth.
The closer Redeemer was interested in the land, but not if it involved a woman. Boaz, the little farther away Redeemer, wanted Ruth. He didn't actually care about the property. He just wanted her. But that was the way to finagle things to get what he wanted. Okay? So, they're in front of God and everybody, many witnesses and elders. It's all declared. Boaz, I'm Boaz. I'm taking Ruth as my own. I'm purchasing the property. Everybody hear it? Everybody see it? Done. Legally binding. The contract is signed with a Birkenstock. We're good.
Gave you my sandal.
But it's interesting here in the King James Version, when he was at the gate, he met the guy, it says here, behold, the kinsman of whom Boaz spake came by, unto whom he said, oh, such a one, come and sit down here.
Oh, such a
Such a
one.
one.
Yeah. That's not, come on over, my dear friend. That's, hey, you, with the face, right here. Yeah.
Such a one.
Okay, so there is the little blessing that the townspeople throw on there. Just to remind you of who these people are. Rachel and Leah are the wives of Jacob, mothers of like half the tribes. Okay, they're Bilhah and Zilpah were their maids who also mothered children, 6 more sons for Jacob. And so the desire is that Ruth and Boaz will have a big family, a great big happy family of influence, of success. They want them to be famous in Bethlehem. Okay? Now, on this side of Bethlehem, we know that they absolutely became famous. They absolutely, this prophecy was fulfilled. Everybody knows who Boaz and Ruth are. They're the great-grandparents of King David. They're in the lineage, not just of David, but also of Jesus. It is kind of interesting, the last line there in verse 12. May your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. You can go back and read in Genesis and Exodus about Judah. His daughter-in-law had to trick him into having a child with her. Her husband had died. The brother who had a responsibility to be the Kinsman Redeemer said, oh no, tell you what I'll do. We'll fool around, but I'm not getting you pregnant. I'm not taking you on. And so Tamar went to Judah and
In disguise.
he believed that she was just a prostitute, which I'm not sure why that's okay. But he got her pregnant, and then she came back later with his ring and
Cord.
yeah, the cord that would have held all that stuff together, and said, "Oh, the father he left these with me." Tamar, who is
Judah's daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
so you can kind of see there's a little bit of parallel here with the kinsman redeemers and the woman who didn't have a child and were trying to establish a line. So they're all kind of aware of the situation, and they Perez became the ancestor of Boaz, and obviously some of the rest of the people there in town.
They were a mess just like we are.
Yeah. So Boaz married Ruth.
Much, have they?
They have a child. They name him Obed. His name means serving. That seems like a good name for a couple of people who are filled and killed with loving kindness, who are always taking care of other people. Having a kid whose name means serving, it seems right. And so in the last few verses there of chapter 4, you get a little bit of genealogy, who was whose father. So you've got Boaz's father is Salmon, and his mother is Rahab. Do you remember?
Say that again.
Yeah.
Do you remember who Boaz's mom Rahab is?
I know who Rahab is. I didn't know it was his mom.
Yeah, well,
I'm assuming it's the same Rahab, based on the rest of the stories. Yeah.
Father was who?
and Jericho.
Yeah.
Solomon.
Rahab was a prostitute from Jericho who protected the Israelite spies before Israel knocked down the walls of Jericho.
In the window,
She hung the red cord out the window. Yeah.
red cord.
Uh-huh.
Thought it was a red rag.
I think mine says a scarlet cord.
But it had to be a big cord.
Well, they let him down out the window.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So,
Rapunzel. Oh, wait, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got Salmon and Rahab, who have this son named Boaz. Boaz marries the Moabite woman Ruth. They have a son named Obed. Obed, when he grows up, has a son named Jesse. Jesse, when he grows up, has all kinds of kids. David is the youngest son.
Or the last.
He is the father of Jesse.
But it's also not complete, too. We really don't know. We only know what's here.
Exactly. There, we can speculate till the cows come home about additional wives, children, daughters, sisters, whatever. But we're stuck with the information that we have. That Jesse and his wife, Mrs. Jesse, that they had multiple sons and some daughters, and that David is the one who God threw his rope around to be the king of Israel instead of Saul. Okay, so there's 14 generations from Abraham to David. You can also find the same lineage if you look here in Ruth 4. You can also find it in Matthew 1 and Luke chapter 3. Find all those same names in the same order. There's not anybody added or taken away, at least in this section. All of that is right on the money from Abraham to David. Now, is it that there were absolutely and only 14 generations between Abraham and David? There's a lot of disagreement about that amongst the big Bible scholars, because it doesn't seem like that's enough time, enough generations of people. That father can mean not just dad, but also ancestor. But at any rate, in Ruth and in Matthew and in Luke, those same lists of names are there.
I have a pedigree chart from Adam to Jesus. I shall bring it next week.
It's fun to see how all that works.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't we do a timeline somewhere along from Adam to, wasn't there a timeline somewhere?
There was. It's rolled up someplace
I had one at home.
for safekeeping.
And it's interesting.
Nice.
It's interesting how short and
Someplace.
how long times were.
Yeah. The one that we've had for years and years, that it goes the full length of this wall.
Oh, really?
I think it used to be up there, didn't it?
Yes, it did, because I got to look at it many times and it's confusing.
Except Benny bought it.
Okay, so that is all of everything that we're gonna read about Boaz and Ruth. a beautiful story, kind of a funny story. Some of it, it seems like it's made for TV. And I'm sure somebody has made this into a movie somewhere.
Yeah, Hallmark.
The story of Ruth was one of my mother's favorite stories. And I read A Lineage of Grace. I don't remember who gave it to me, but it's a story of all the women leading up to Mary. And I always thought the women back there were very subservient. Boy, I learned different in that book.
I think they are today too. Some,
Well, yeah.
my wife is. Well, I don't.
Does
I
she
don't-
know
She
that?
does the 10 o'clock
She
news
does,
on
yeah,
Fox.
I don't-
I can't think of her name
feel
right
her on
now.
that.
She wrote a book,
That's
The
just
Women of the Bible.
Oh yeah? There's bad girls of the Bible. Many of them are also in Jesus' lineage.
But he made them all good.
Jesus uses everybody.
Dawn has a question.
Yes, Dawn.
Well, I was just wondering why they give the child to Naomi. Towards the end.
Oh, she's Nana. She's right there. She's in the house.
Okay, because then they said Naomi has a child.
Yeah,
This one says it.
Naomi, they put her right into Grandma Naomi's lap, and she's gonna take care of him. She's gonna show the same kind of loving kindness for Obed that these other two have showed to everybody else.
Isn't it also sort of symbolic that he's replacing her? She has a son again.
But it's still their child.
Right. But, you know, it doesn't
It
really,
might just be
I know, I
gossip
did,
too.
Yeah.
that's why I didn't know.
Amber-
Naomi.
A son has been born to Naomi.
Yeah, that's what I said. Read.
Not
Yeah,
exactly.
that's what it says.
It's
That's
a
what I was wondering.
somebody to fill that void. So she went from Naomi, which means pleasant, to Mara, which means bitter, and now
she's Naomi.
she's Naomi again.
Grammy Naomi.
Because
She's just a grandma.
when he took Ruth, he also took her. See, you're
She's part
lucky.
of that.
See how lucky you are?
See, James?
Wow,
You
James,
got to-
think about that.
You were opening a can of worms there, ma'am.
I'd be the husband who'd be dead. It's some other guy who's lucky, not me.
Oh, but he's already got kids, so
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah,
Cole would get everything.
Isn't he lucky?
Yeah.
they're gonna need to have a date first, Cole. All right, well, that'll be enough for this one. I'm gonna turn this off. Hey, we'll pick up next time with a little bit more closer to David. Probably have to talk about Bethlehem and shepherds and get some cultural stuff, so tune in.